this morning. I really appreciate that. I live in outside of Belfair, and just starting to a few flakes.
Yeah.
Was great until I got to the hill up here, and then it was like, oh my goodness. I'd turn around and go home, but I'm closer here than I was
just
home.
go to the end of the road.
So the botany of flowers. I kind of think of flowers as the glamour of a plant. But we're going to talk a little bit more about what is a flower and why are they important. As you can see up here on the board, it's the showy representation. It's the part of the plant that attracts pollinators, or they have something that other animals, insects, hummingbirds are a big pollinator. Even bats are pollinators. And plants need, not all plants, I'm looking at flowers, those with conspicuous flowers, need pollinators to move the pollen around. Usually we think of bumblebees, or we think of honeybees to move the pollen around. Well, there's a lot more to it than just those organisms, those two. And why are flowers important? Like I said, pollination, biodiversity. In nature, the whole process of evolution. So you can have a family of flowers that, and this is what's going to be really important in the next decade or so, is plants are going to have to become more resilient. So they need good genes, they need good opportunities to grow, and so we need plants and flowers for the diversity in our habitats. Aesthetic value. Who does not love getting a bouquet of flowers? Raise your hand. Who does not love getting a bouquet of flowers? My husband always gives me bulbs, flowering bulbs, because then I'll have them year after year. Well, unless they die. They have an emotional impact. You know, you can be feeling really low and really sad, depressed, and you go into a garden or you go into a greenhouse and you see all these beautiful plants and oxygen and flowers. And you can have different themes in your yard, different colors of flowers. I've always wanted to have a moonlight garden. Flowers that bloom white and are very conspicuous at night. And in the moon, they just pop. So emotional impact. Flowers say a lot. There's a whole language of flowers. If you're interested, just type in language of flowers. And flowers mean different things to different people, but there is a language of them. And then environmental benefits. Again, diversity, food source. I mean, how much do we eat that relies on flowers and pollinators? I think they say there's a difference of opinion on this. Some say only 1/3 of our food. I say 3/4 of our food, but that's my opinion. So, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I have no problems answering questions. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dissect a flower. How many of you have done this before? All right. How many of you done this in college class? Yeah. The best thing today is there's no test. This is all for fun. So we're going to look at the main 4 parts of a flower are the sepals. Let's see if I can find this. There we go. They're on the outer edge or below the petals. Now in tulips, we'll get to those in just a minute when we dissect, but sometimes the sepals are not always green. Sometimes they're the color of the petals. And sometimes the sepals are what's the show. I think, like I said, I think flowers are the glamour of a plant. You got bright colors of petals or sepals. They smell good, most of them, not all, but most of them smell pretty good. So that's the perfume. And sometimes they have, it's called nectar tracts. And I'll show you, those are really important for bees and other insects that see life through an ultraviolet lens. And I'll show you some really cool pictures. I went to school with a woman who was getting her master's degree, and all she did was go take pictures of flowers with a UV filter because that's what the insects were seeing. And it was part of her master's program. But it was really cool. But let's get back to the parts of the flower and their function. So the sepals wrap around the flower bud and protects the flower bud, protects the petals. And then we have the petals right here. And this is a bright, showy red flower. Okay. And again, that's what attracts, it's a color. It attracts attention. And then we have the pistil, which is the female parts. And that's this green here in the middle. So the pistil is made up of a number of pieces. The stigma at the top, and then the pollen tube, which is inside here. The exterior tube or shaft here is called the style. And then we go down into the ovary. And then there's lots of bits and pieces and parts there. We'll look at it, but that's the seeds. Or the ovary, if a ovary is fertilized, it forms the fruit. So it forms the apple, the pear, the squash. The ovary on peas is the pea pod, not the peas themselves. They are the seeds. And those are found here in the ovule. Let's see, where's that at? Right there. Okay, and then, so that's all the female parts. And we'll look at those in just a minute. And then the stamen are these bright orange. So the stamen is made up of two parts. The filament, which is kind of the thread-like part here, and then the anther, which is where the pollen is. And when we get down in the tulip, you can actually rub that anther and get the pollen on your fingers. But the important thing about that is that's how pollen is transferred from flower to flower, is the insects, the hummingbird, the butterfly, the bat, they go in and they get that pollen on their outside, and then they fly to another flower and they gather more pollen, but then they also leave pollen because the stigma up here is kind of sticky and it attracts pollen. That's just the way it works. I think it's pretty awesome. You guys have any questions? Okay. Okay, so let's get into some of the boring stuff before we get into some of the fun stuff. So there's a lot of different types of flowers. We have a complete flower or we have an incomplete flower. So a complete flower has, like I said, all four main parts. They have the sepals, the petals, the stigma, and the stamens, or excuse me, the pistil. So, and examples of that are roses and tulips. Incomplete is they're missing one or more of the main parts. So, like squash. Squash will either have male or female flowers. And we'll get to that in just a minute, but they're missing something of those four main parts. And begonias. Okay, so now we get into perfect or imperfect flowers. So perfect flowers, like I said, have both male and female parts. So they're complete. It's a complete plant, a complete flower. Examples is apples, orchids, carrots, legumes. Imperfect flowers, they're typically missing either the male parts or the female parts. So you have to have both flowers close by so that the pollinators can pick up the pollen from the male flowers and transfer it to the female flowers. Again, squash, begonias, cucumbers, corn. Corn actually, I don't know why I put corn there, because corn is mostly wind pollinated, not necessarily insect pollinated. Okay, let's see what we got. Yes. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I didn't put that up here, but that's a very good question. Oh, thank you. I forgot that. The question was, like in squash, because they have male or female flowers, does the plant have both on the same, does the plant have both types of flowers, male or female, on the plant itself? Okay. So, yes, in squash. And those plants are called dioecious because they have both the male flowers and the female flowers on one plant. Now, there are some plants that only have male flowers on the plant, and like ginkgos. Ginkgos only have male flowers or female flowers on the plant. So those plants are called monoecious because they only have one, mono. If they have both on the same plant, they're called dioecious too. Okay? I didn't think about adding that, but very good question. And some flowers like tomatoes and squash, they're really fascinating because they require the native bees to pollinate them. And what they need is they need the vibration that the bees do when they're collecting pollen. They need that vibration. And there's a whole science to this. So tomatoes that are grown in a greenhouse, they have to put pollinators in the greenhouse so the tomatoes, the greenhouse tomatoes, will be fertilized. So it's kind of fun. Bees are really fascinating. I won't talk too much about bees because Mary next week is going to talk about mason bees. So when I say pollinators, I'm thinking of everything else, like I said, bats and hummingbirds and butterflies and moths and native bees, and even some beetles are pollinators. Yeah. We have a Zoom question, and what is it?
So the female flowers will the male flowers still work, or will they just die?
They will die. They will die. So in squash, if you want to do squash blossom fritters, you can wait until the pollen has been taken off the anthers, and then you can take that out and stuff them and dip them in egg, and oh, they're really good. But good question. The male parts don't have the eggs or the ovum to produce the fruit. Okay. And then you get into flower shapes. And this is where it gets a little complicated. But you can see some real similarities here. You've got, I'm not even going to go through all of these. But there's some really fun ones. Hummingbirds typically love the tubular and the funnel. They like to get down in it. Their proboscis, their nose goes, and their tongue spins down and gets all the good nectar. Hummingbirds are typically attracted to flowers that have nectar. There's a lesser long-nosed bat, migrates up from Mexico into the Southwest. And they are nectar feeders. Very small population of bats, percentage of species, are nectar feeders. But these bats, the lesser long-nosed bat, love agave. So you'll find them nesting, maternity nests, maternity caves, up in cave systems above fields of agave. So, and they're fun. They're cute little guys. Let's see what's next. Let's do it. Oh, now we get to dissect. Hey. So, we'll get set up. I need a flower. Yes, yes. Well, thank you. And we have some master gardeners here today. Thank you very much for helping. who are going to be around walking and will help you as we go through this process. So if you have any questions, ask a master gardener who's walking around, or raise your hand and ask me. So this is kind of the hands-on part of the class. Okay, all right. And we're going to look at the flower. We're going to key into the flower. Yeah, and actually just pull this over here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So before we get started on that, let's see. Tools. And can I borrow this? I will return it, I promise. Okay. A little bit of lab safety. We don't need lab goggles because we're not blowing anything up. But I do need to warn you, you have razor blades, which are very sharp. And some of these tweezers are very sharp. They have very, very pointy ends. So be very, very careful. But for the magnifying glass, the key here is to put your thumb at the bottom of the round part and put your thumb on your nose. Either side, doesn't matter. Okay? And then when you start looking at the plant, you bring the plant up to your lens, and you can, it'll be either really close or kind of far apart, depending on your vision. Okay? So again, plant that lens on your nose, and then you can pull the plant parts up to you. Okay. Thank you very much. There you go. All right. So let's get started. Plants are the number of petals, the number of stamens, and parts of the ovary, how many chambers an ovary has, is all dependent on what family the plants are from. So some plants that belong in like the lily family they're called three meris because they have three parts. So everything in that plant is going to be in multiples of three. So you'll have three sepals, three petals. The stigma will have three little bumps at the top. You'll have multiples of three on the stamen. So that's what we'll be looking at today. But other plants will have like apple flowers. They're five meris. So they're going to have five sepals at the bottom, five petals, but they may have more than five, but they'll have multiples of five stamen all the way around. Native roses have, plant taxonomy is really fun because sometimes if they get tired of counting, they just use the infinity sign. They're tired of counting. You know, you reach out, my limit was 25. I could count 25 pieces and parts, and then I was done. But some people just don't have the patience, so they do that little infinity sign. But if you really did count, they would be multiples of either 3, 4, or 5. And somebody says, well, what if you have 6? Well, it's a 3, because 6 is divided by, you know, it's simple math here, people. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, you didn't know you had to know math in botany, did you? Okay, so take your flower. And I'm going to do things down this way so that people in Zoom can see, but you can hold yours upright. So what you can do is pull back your leaves, and then this is the stem. This is the stem. Now, if you look at the number of petals, all the colored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6. There's 6 petals? Actually, there's 3. There's 3. What's the outer layer? sepals. And if you look at them, they look just a little different, not too much. Now, again, remember the sepal protects the flower blossom. So they may be brown, but sometimes they will change color to match the petal color. So you can just take off one of the sepals, put it there. And if you want, you can take off a petal and put it there. And you can look at closer and see, they look very similar. And then if you want, you can take your razor blade and cut off the top part there. Or, these are really easy, you can just take your thumbs and just peel it back, just like this. And then just lay it down like that. Okay. Now, or you can take all the petals off and all the sepals off. That works too. And then you have this part here in the middle. Now this one here has, all the stamens are around the outside, and in the middle is where your pistil is, okay, the female parts. So you can take all of these off very carefully with your tweezers. Just take it off and lay it on the paper there. Okay. So let's start here. You can see here, this here is the stamen. This is the male part. So the bottom part, this white kind of clearish stubby piece is the, let me check my picture here, make sure I get the right word, filament. That's the filament. And the top part here is yellowish, and that's where the pollen is. That's where the stamen is. I mean, the anther. The stamen is made up of the anther, which is where the pollen is, and the filament, which holds it up. So if you take this, let's take that and look at it. So put your glass on your thumb, and you can pick up the plant parts. They're not going to hurt you. And you can just bring that right up to your lens and look at it, and look at the shape of it. And then if you want to turn it upside down, you can then look at the filament part. Can everyone see those parts and pieces? How about Zoom? Are we having any problems there? Okay, we're working on it. Oh. Oh. Like that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So again, this is the filament and this is the anther. And this whole piece here is the stigma. I mean the stamen. Stamen, excuse me. Yeah. Let me just tear that off. There we go. Yeah. So how many stamens do you guys have? Six. But we only had 3 petals and 3 sepals. 3 meris, remember 3 meris. Okay. Okay. Do you have any questions? You only have 5. It's called diversity. And we don't hold it against the flower if they have one less or one more. Remember, Mother Nature is going to mess with you if you say, absolutely, there is only 6. Because then one will have more, one will have less. I was doing some field work looking for this endangered plant. And they said, this plant, the Cypripedium lady's slipper, clustered lady slipper, is only found in the wooded area. You'll never find it on the road or near the road. No disturbed sites. So we're hiking up and down this mountain all day long, zip zack and back and forth. Could not find it. We were on our way out. We sat down, took a break, and we're on an old road cut. And I'm sitting there and my feet are out in front of me and I'm drinking my water and I look and I thought, no, yes. There was the clustered lady slipper that we've been looking for all day in the woods on the road cut in a disturbed site. So when I say it's going to be 6 petals or 6 anthers or whatever, it's sometimes not that absolute. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so for the female parts of the flower, we're looking at the stigma, which is right here on top. It's 3. It's got almost like a little, not quite an X, but kind of a chevron. Can you guys see that really clear? Okay. And then you have the pistil, which is the kind of the stem part down to the ovary. And the ovary is right here in this part right there. So what you can do is break off the top part. There we go. And then if you want to see how many chambers there are in this, remember, there should be 3. Should be. May only be 2. You just cut right through here. And then you could look at, that's the top of the stem, or the little petiole. And that's called a peduncle. It's kind of a swollen area, but it's not the ovary. The ovary is, I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but it's right here on the end. So if you take your tweezers, you can turn it over. Take your tweezers, turn it over, get a hold of it, and hopefully you'll be able to see the chambers underneath. I didn't cut clear enough on that one. And sometimes you just can't see this. This is microscope work sometimes. Up, there it is. There it is. Not sure if you can see it. It's going to be really faint, and it's going to mimic the style at the top.
That's the base, right?
That's at the base, yeah. Yes.
Okay, so hers has 3 and mine has 4. When it's pollinated and it goes to make more bulbs, does the one that has 4 versus the one that has 3 makes a slightly different plant down the road?
No, because the plant, oh, I'm sorry? Oh, thank you. I see it on the backboard. So the question is, does the number of anthers affect the number of the fruit? Is that correct? Okay. No, it does not. Because remember, the anthers are we're only after the pollen on the anther. The number of stamens does not affect the number of fruit or the number of the ovules.
So mine here will make the same tulip she's got.
That is correct. So you had
4.
4
She's got 3.
and 3. So you had 4 stamen. And the ovary is the female part. It has nothing to do with the stamen. Okay? This is kind of the hard part. This is the hardest part of all. You know, Mother Nature likes to hide things sometimes. Doesn't want to show things off. Yeah. Okay. So test time. Get your paper out. Just teasing. Just teasing. Okay. Shall we go on? We have a couple more slides. We're going to talk a little bit. Oh,
In a moment.
in a moment. This technology. When I was teaching, we didn't have this. Okay. And if you can't find the ovaries, come and see me when we take a break because it's easy. Or come up here and look at this one. I want you to get the full experience here, not just part of it. I got it. I got it. Okay, so how do flowers attract pollinators? Again, visual cues, bright flowers, bright colors, distinctive shapes. And here you can see just a few shapes. Here's a star shape. That's a 5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here is a hummingbird on bee balm, it looks like. Here's an iris. And here's a butterfly on a tiger lily or a lily. I think the native one is erythium. By the way, the leaves on this are really delicious. But I didn't tell you that. I can't tell you that. Can I? I can't tell her. Then we have what's called nectar guides. Some flowers look very plain and unassuming, kind of, but they have discoloration on their petals. Those are called nectar guides. And we'll look at that in just a minute. I'm going to hold the suspense just a minute on that one. And then scent. The scent signals the presence of nectar, which is a liquid syrupy thing. So how many of you have gone out hiking or in the garden and you smell something really sweet and you kind of see this white flower off to the side? Yeah, honeysuckle. Birds and butterflies and bees love honeysuckle because they're after that sweet nectar. And I mentioned the lesser long-nosed bat eating the agave. Agave flowers are pretty big. It's a beautiful flower, but it's their main food source. So the pregnant female bats are flying north. They're looking for a cave and they stock up on that sugar. So any questions? Okay. So nectar guides. This is what insects see. This is a plumeria. So this flower here is most likely either white or really pale yellow. They're beautiful flowers, or pink. There's some pink plumeria too. But if you go out, I was in Hawaii on a trail, and I started sniffing. That smells really sweet. That smells, I wonder what that is. So I went up over this hill, and there was a whole grove of plumeria being grown. Beautiful. They smell delicious. But the insects are attracted to the nectar guides. Sometimes they're visible to us, but most of the time they're not. This is like a wild rose. And again, this is the bee balm. This is a cosmo. This is a poppy. So this is what the bees are seeing, the insects are seeing, and that's why they're attracted to certain flowers. Here is one, it's a split. So this is what the bees are seeing, and this is what we see. Isn't that fascinating? I think it's just, I know. You can if you get a UV filter. Of course, going around nature, But I also wanted to give you some resources for pollinators. And again, it really enforce the fact that pollinators are really important for our survival as well as for nature. So I don't have anything more. Do we have any more questions? Okay, third row in. Yes. Hi.
My question is, I know the answer, but so when the bees or whatever, grab pollen from the flower, bring it over to another flower, how does pollen get down to the ovary?
Okay, so the question is, bees, just an example, pollinators move pollen from one flower to another. And the question was, how does the pollen get down to the ovary? Okay, so, huh? No. We'll go right back up to this. So the pollen gets stuck to the stigma because it's kind of sticky stigma. And then this is a pollen tube. So inside this stigma is a tube that goes all the way down, and then the pollen fertilizes the ovule there. And it's on the inside of the style. The style is kind of the outside. The pollen tube is in the middle. And it's really fascinating because I won't get into details. Sorry. Yeah, well, the pollen kind of, how the pollen gets down is the pollen gets to the stigma and it just kind of rolls down into a hole. If you took this stigma and cut it open with a microscope, you'll see there's a little tiny hole there. And that's the pollen tube. Okay, and we had a question right behind, gentlemen. The question is, why do some plants flower in the winter when there are no bees? Well, there's other insects around. And sometimes those plants may not need bees to fertilize them. They may be wind pollinated. I have citrus trees and they grow in my greenhouse. And my husband's always out there trying to figure out how to get rid of the insects. And I'm sitting here going, well, honey, the insects are fertilizing the citrus trees. So, leave them alone for a while. One year I made the mistake of pulling my mason bees. Don't listen to this, Mary. I pulled my mason bees tubes out of the house and put them in my greenhouse and then forgot about it. Well, the greenhouse was nice and toasty warm and they hatched. And we had a bumper crop of citrus fruit last year. So, do we have any more questions? Yeah. Any more questions? Do we have time for one more? One more, right there. So the question is, we typically plant bulbs to grow tulips. And typically the seeds are not used to grow more tulips. That's the whole part of propagating tulips is to propagate the bulbs because they form little bulblets and you tear them off. But you can grow tulips from seed. You can grow pretty much anything from seed. If it's a cultivar, the plant, the offspring that grows may not be like the parent because of basic genetics and that whole series of questions. So typically you don't worry about a lot of your bulb plants forming seeds. Okay.